Just gonna give it another minute, almost another few seconds, and then we'll jump right in. Welcome. Thanks for joining us today. Well, hello, everyone. I'm Tom Cadigan, Associate Director of Alumni Relations and a proud member of the Holy Cross Class of 2002. And wherever you may be zooming in from, I want to welcome you to today's Alumni and Parent Webinar event, brought to you by the Holy Cross Club of Greater Boston. And today's topic hits home for many of us: home buying. Our presentation today is titled "Everything You Need to Know About Buying a Home in 2023, a popular topic based on the number of responses today. Now, some very brief housekeeping items before I introduce today's wonderful presenter. We'll be together for just about an hour. Allie will start with some prepared remarks, and then we'll take questions from you for as long as time allows. And I encourage you to submit questions throughout the presentation using the Q&A function located on your toolbar. Please keep them coming, and I'll return later to facilitate your questions. It's now my pleasure to introduce our terrific presenter, Allie Dudley Joyce, from the class of 2010, an experienced Boston professional and a long-standing volunteer with the Holy Cross Club of Greater Boston. She's a past president of the club, so we're in the presence of greatness. Allie is a realtor for William Ravis Real Estate, Mortgage, and Insurance, and has led many seminars and webinars like this for Holy Cross alumni, parents, and friends. And we are so grateful for her involvement today. Allie, welcome.
Thank you so much, Tom. I'm feeling very nostalgic today, especially not only because we've done this a couple of times, but also because last year when we did this a little earlier in the year, I was very pregnant, and today is the birth of my son. So Holy Cross has truly been there for me for so many life events. So we'll be doing that fun cake smash after this. But to get started, I always like to just get a feel for who's in the room. So I want to ask a few poll questions, and then also some questions that'll just be open-ended and you can answer in the chat. So when did you graduate from Holy Cross? So the poll question, as you see, will come up, and just take a second and answer the questions. I am the 6 to 15 years. So if there's anyone out there in the room who falls in the 2010 range, don't be shy, give a little wave. And the next question is, let's see. There we go. Which of the following best describes your circumstances? Are you a first-time home buyer? Are you upsizing? That means you're selling your current home and you're buying the next one. Are you downsizing? Hopefully you've paid off your last Holy Cross tuition bill. Or are you investing? All those investors out there, shout out to you. Investing in real estate is how I got into real estate, and it's one of my passions. So you see the polls come up on your screen. We'll just give everyone a second to answer those, and we will get started. Okay, so these questions are in the chat. So who thinks the real estate market will crash? This question I'm getting all the time. There are no right or wrong answers. I believe everyone is intelligent in the room, and all we can do is take the data that we have and make some analysis based on what we see. And then the next question is, when is the best time to buy? So these, fill them out in the chat, and we will take a peek and go through them. So Tom, I think I accidentally minimized some of the poll questions. So I will give everyone a second to respond, and then I'll have you bring them up in a minute. But I just wanted to, while you're filling that out, just to give a little bit more information about me, just so you know I have some street cred. As Tom mentioned, graduated Holy Cross with a psychology degree in 2010. Go liberal arts. You can do anything with that education, as they say. And I immediately went into financial sales. And I was lucky that I had a very well rounded sales career there. And I decided to follow my passion, which started off with really investing in real estate. And I decided to go into real estate sales. So since then, I have had 212 successful home sales across 124 million in sales. And the reason I bring that up is just so you know, I've done this a few times, and I'm going to take my experience as being an active participant in the market, in the Boston and the greater Boston market, and also now Rhode Island, actually, and just pass that on to you so that you can empower yourself in this decision, whether you're buying this year or years to come. So before we go into the agenda, Tom, can we bring up some of the first poll question? All right. Ooh, okay, so 14% just graduated. That's amazing. Buying real estate young. And then I see some people in my range, and a couple people 16 to 25, and then also 25. So we have a great group here today. Lots of different experience. Some people just jumping into the market and people experiencing other markets as well. Wondering if there's any similarities that you're seeing. Okay, and we have lots of first-time home buyers. Awesome. There's, in my opinion, and I am absolutely biased considering my profession, there's nothing better you can do than be a homeowner and set yourself up for building your assets in life. We have a couple of downsizers. That's very exciting, can be kind of daunting. And some investors. That's wonderful. Well, welcome everyone. Let's take a quick peek in the chat and see, did anyone, all right, we have some people a little shy. They're afraid to answer whether they think the market's going to crash or not. Maybe that means you're on the fence. So look, we'll talk about the market. That's the first thing that we will go over is the market and what to expect. And we're going to be looking at Boston, greater Boston, and that is really, think the city of Boston and an hour-mile radius. That's according to the Greater Boston Association of Realtors. And then we're going to do a deep dive into the buying process. So don't fall asleep on me. There's lots of steps, but we'll make sure we go over it in detail. Then we're going to talk about negotiating. What are the different levers you can pull to mitigate your risk in this process? Because at the end of the day, investing in real estate, purchasing real estate, it is about taking calculated risk. And then I'll share some advice and we'll open it up for questions. So in talking about the market trends, I wanted to start off with some market leaders and what they were forecasting this year. It was interesting to see. You have someone in this graphic here. We have some estimating 5% gains, some estimating 5% losses in prices, and everything in between. And it just goes to show that people don't know what is going to happen right now. And we'll talk about why that is. We're in a little bit of uncharted territory. It's not necessarily a typical down market or up market. But on the other side, whereas they were all over the board in terms of prices, everyone feels pretty confident that there will just be less home sales this year. So let's talk about what we are seeing in Greater Boston. So what's interesting in terms of prices, we've actually already had a price correction. So if you can see my cursor, right around here was the COVID years, and we had a big spike in prices, as you can see. This was the top about last year. People were going hundreds of thousands over asking. Property was just flying off the market. And then this is actually the second half of last year when rates really started to hit the market and make an impact and buyers started dropping off. We actually saw a price adjustment. I would say it was particularly felt in the Boston condo market. And again, we're talking generalization. So every market is different. Every even condo is different. But in general, we saw a price drop here. And in the beginning of this year, it's come up a little bit, but I suspect it will probably start stabilizing here. Now, I don't know if we're really going to see another major price drop. And the reason for that is because of inventory. So we're still in this extremely low inventory environment. So here we are back in 2015. This is the start. we see the inventory is obviously a lot higher. It fluctuates. You see these jagged lines. That's just due to seasonality. And then during COVID years, again, we had a really big drop. People were staying put. People were working from home. And we still are really low for this inventory. So for there to be this massive market crash this year, we need to see two things to happen: a big increase in inventory and a decrease in demand. I do think the rates are going to, as they continue to rise, and the Fed said they're going to rise at least 3 more times this year, that buyers will pull out of the market and that will start to even things out. But for this '08 crash to happen, I think we'd need to see a lot more inventory. And we're not getting inventory from resale right now because a lot of sellers, they're calling it in the industry right now, seller strike. And I just can't blame them in a way. They have a mortgage for 3%. They don't want to sell that and then buy something for 7%. It's a really tough pill to swallow. Now, them are going to have to sell. Life circumstances force you to sell, fortunately or unfortunately. And so I think right now people are kind of holding back. And as the spring and summer market comes to fruition, we're going to see more inventory come on because sellers are just going to have to throw in the towel and say, look, I got to sell. I can't stay in this 2-bed apartment anymore because, I have 3 kids or whatever it might be. So I do think we'll start to see more inventory from the resale market. We'll see a little bit of inventory from construction in general in Boston and Greater Boston. We're not going to get a ton of brand new construction. I went to also a Holy Cross grads, one of my best friends in Florida. I visited her. She just bought in a new complex. It's gorgeous. They built, I think, thousands of homes, and they built a new downtown. It's a new zip code. I can't even put their town name into my GPS because that's how new it is. And she actually bought something similar before moving to Florida in California. Massachusetts just isn't like that. If we have a little subdivision, maybe at max it's 10 homes, maybe it's 20 homes, or it's condos. So we're not going to get a ton of inventory from new construction. It's also really expensive to borrow right now, particularly for everyone. But I think if it's expensive to buy as a primary, it's even more expensive to buy as an investor. And the cost of materials are still pretty high. So where else are we going to get the inventory? Well, often you'll get the inventory from distress sales. And this is a good indication of foreclosures. So here's our foreclosure rate, almost 8 years ago. You see it's in the 5 to 6 range, maybe 4 to 6, depending on the year. It went down as the market got better, got stronger, and it went really low. These are the COVID years. And the reason for that is there was a forbearance program. They weren't allowing anyone or they weren't letting anyone to foreclose. They were giving people some space and some breathing room in case their jobs were lost. And you might have seen headlines. We have 100% increase in foreclosures. Yeah, we do. It went from 0.5 to almost 1.5. So it's still very, very low foreclosures. And I don't necessarily think we're going to get this huge increase in foreclosures. Since '08, we've really tightened up the lending requirements. And we also have further increased them since the COVID years. I remember that in the beginning of COVID, they went from 50% debt to income ratio down to, and now we're at, I believe, 43%. So do I think this number will go up? Yes, I do. I think we're probably going to see some more distressed sales. This, in my opinion, is more of a lagging indicator of the real estate market, particularly in Massachusetts, because it takes anywhere from 6 months to a year to actually be foreclosed on. If we are in, a lot of people are buying with adjustable rate mortgages, or they were doing that particularly last year. I don't know if people are doing it as much this year. And if you plan to be in that property long term, that adjustable rate, if you are not able to refinance prior to that, that might cause some foreclosures to increase, or we might see more inventory come up from that because all of a sudden sellers are saying, I can't afford this mortgage. I need to sell my home and maybe rent for a little bit or what have you. Who knows? maybe rates will, some lenders think that in 5 years rates will come down a little bit, and people will be able to refinance. I don't have a crystal ball for that far, but I know for the short term for this year and probably part of next year, we're not going to see rates, really go down. This is an interesting data point. It's months of supply. It's also known as absorption rate. And this is really indicative of demand, actually. So it's looking at any one given time, how long will it take the buyers to absorb all the property in the market? And you can see, this is 2015, 2016, we are in that 4-month range. Anything less than 6 months is considered a seller's market. 6 months is considered an even market, and over than 6 months, longer than 6 months, is considered a buyer's market. So we're still in the seller's market, kind of going towards even. And then during COVID, the absorption rate just went really down, and particularly in the greater Boston suburbs, or really for single family homes, because people wanted outdoor space. They wanted an extra room for their office. If you had just moved into this awesome loft apartment where everything was wide open, you probably might be, pulling your hair out if you had roommates. And so we saw this really big increase in demand and then a decrease in supply, which really made the properties just jump off the market, just jump off the shelf. So what does it feel like now when you're in the market? Well, it's interesting. So prices have gone down and they're stabilizing a little bit. I think they're moving towards stabilization. The inventory is still so low. And although I'll have a caveat that I had a lot of alerts today on new listings. So that's a really good sign. We're starting to, the spring market felt a little delayed because usually we see a little bit more in February. So that's a good sign, but still, the inventory for the beginning of March still feels really, really low. So properties moving really quickly. We're still seeing offer deadlines. That means, let's say the property comes out on Monday, they might defer showings until the open house, but they'll hold all offers until Monday, the following Monday. And that's when we anticipate, there's a bidding war, there's going to be a lot of demand, and you have to compete for the property. So we're still seeing that, particularly in entry level price point of whatever area you're looking for, and any property that's priced well. We're seeing it move really quickly. Now, here is where we were in the COVID time period. And last year, you see that we were 15 days on the market. And we've gone up. This was the second half of last year. We've gone up, and then we came down a little bit because the inventory really went down. So again, I suspect that very slowly but surely, we're going to be moving towards longer days on the market. But some property that is going to be, again, entry level price point is going to move still really quickly. Now, here's percent closed above listing price. So here we are last year and the year before, people were offering hundreds of thousands over asking. I had a client offer $456,000 over asking on a property. Now this was, and they would admit it, they had family living in that neighborhood, so they had to be there. They also were coming from San Francisco, so everything felt cheap to them. And not everyone did that. I actually had someone get a property 100,000 under asking. So everything is really based on the property. Not to digress too much, but someone had asked a question, where are the hot markets? Where can you get deals? And I would say it's really based on the property. Any property that's been on the market for a longer period of time, that's where you have more buying power. But I don't want to digress too much. So how much are we going over asking? Well, we are not going in the 70% and over. We're still in that 20 to 30%. So we are still seeing property go over asking. It's not as high as we were seeing before. So here's just some general themes. So what are we seeing? So first of all, believe it or not, maybe this is disappointing, but prices have already corrected. I know it doesn't necessarily, it still feels really expensive because rates are high and properties going over asking, but they've already started to correct. My suspicion is that because of the lack of inventory, we're going to see them move towards stabilization with property moving really quickly, that's priced right. or is at that entry level price point. So to my people who are considering selling, maybe those downsizers out there, price is really important. This is not, there's really no market to do that, but maybe you could have done this last year or the year before. This is not the market to test a number, or to hope that buyers will negotiate down if you start high. Buyers are still, they're still conditioned that property will move quickly and go over asking. I think we'll need more time and more equalization in the market for that to change. So right now, pricing right on market is really important. So the market still feels competitive. We're probably, again, moving towards equalization, but it's always going to lean towards a seller's market. But good news, we're seeing contingencies come into play. We're seeing home inspections, financing contingencies, those coming back into play again. Not that you couldn't buy a house without it last year, but it was very difficult in these multiple offer situations if someone was going to waive everything. That's tough to compete with. So luckily, we're seeing those contingencies come into play. And if you feel that you want to wait it out until rates go down, you might be waiting for a very long time, and the market might have gone up at that point too. So, excuse me for 1 second. So let's talk about the home buying process. I'll try to keep it interesting because I could talk about this for a really long time and there's so much that goes into it. So the first thing someone said, someone asked a question, what's the first thing you do? The first thing you want to do is consult with the buyer's agent. And I know this sounds biased, but the reason why you want to do that is because your agent is your anchor contact. A good agent is going to be the only person that you talk to. You will have to talk to your lender, but you want this person to be your go-to. They're communicating to the listing agent. They're doing all your due diligence. They're calling the building inspector if you have questions. They are calling contractors if you need to bring them in to look at potential work you want to do to the house. They're dealing with the lender if we have to move the mortgage commitment date, which we'll talk about. So this person is your anchor contact. And to make it a stress-free situation, I'd recommend starting here. I usually I recommend having a consultation. I usually spend about an hour with potential buyers talking about where they are in life, what are they looking for, their must-haves, and why you're interested in having that. And the reason the why is very important is that I might be able to open up inventory to you, both in terms of location and also kinds of homes and kinds of properties based on that why. The other thing that needs to happen, if nothing else happens during this conversation, is the agent needs to present to you what is called a Massachusetts mandatory agency disclosure. This disclosure is mandated by the state of Massachusetts for any real estate agent to bring this up to you in your first discussion about real estate. And it is not a contract. It even says it at the top. It is a disclosure of your rights. And you should know as a consumer, you're very much protected in this process. A real estate agent actually has a fiduciary responsibility to do everything in your best interest. It's something that I take a lot of pride in and I take very seriously for my clients. And anyone you work with should feel that way as well. Next thing you want to do is meet with a mortgage professional. So similar to a real estate agent, and that agent might be able to refer you to, someone, you want to work with a mortgage professional who is infinitely available. I tend to, if clients ask me for referrals, I tend to refer people who work with either just a mortgage company or a smaller credit union or a smaller bank. And the reason for this is because you want that person to have a direct connection with your underwriter. So the mortgage professional oversees the process, they start the process, and then the underwriter is the person who is nitty gritty. And this person is black and white. There's no gray matter for them. That's part of the reason why, the lending criteria has gone up. There's no wiggle room with these underwriters, which is a good thing overall for the real estate market. And, for you, and so you want to make sure that this mortgage professional has either their own underwriter or has a few underwriters that they use, because we don't want when your mortgage commitment is up, and we'll talk about that, we don't want to be going to a million people trying to figure out what the status is and not hearing from someone. You also want this person to be able to write approvals really whenever. The other night, It was about 8 o'clock at night. I had just tucked my son in, and we were negotiating on an offer. And I was working with a great loan officer, and he was getting me the pre-approvals right away. Um, it's not that people can't have work-life balance, and it's not like that all the time, but real estate is about, sometimes we can have a competitive edge. We want to go in with an offer right after that showing. And it's important that the professionals you're working with, attorneys are a different story, but the lender and the real estate agent really should be very, very available, because that's going to set you up for success. You also want to make sure this person is creative and has a number of different loan options. There's a few things I'm seeing right now that lenders are helping buyers with to get a little creative and help increase your purchase power. One of them is recasting. And this is interesting. So what they'll do is, let's say you have, so a conventional loan, there's a conventional loan limit and there's a jumbo loan limit. So let's say if you put 20% down, you're going to be in this conventional loan limit. If you put less than 20% down, you're going to be in the jumbo loan limit. Oh, this particular lender, sometimes they have better rates for jumbo loans. So you might choose to put less money down, take on mortgage insurance, close, and then you will recast the loan. So you'll take the remainder of your down payment after closing, make a principal only payment, and then your loan will be recalculated. You'll lose the mortgage insurance. Now you have to make sure that the who's ever actually backing the loan allows this, but it's a popular strategy right now. I also have a lender who is, if you need to sell in order to buy, all of your equity is trapped in your home, what they will do is underwrite you based on your home selling. Now they will get an independent price opinion for this. And they'll say, we'll base it off of this price. So maybe it's less than what we would get in the market, but they will underwrite you based on you getting that price. You're able to purchase a home without a home sale contingency. You're able to close on that home. You're not stressing, and then you can put it on the market, and they'll give you 6 months to sell it. So those are the creative things. Notice I haven't mentioned rates. Rates don't matter until you have an offer accepted. So you could do all the shopping for someone who has a great rate, but that program that they have might be ending. And who knows when you'll find your home. You don't want to be on a time limit to find a property, because that's extremely stressful for you. So if you're really interested in shopping rates, most of them can match. I would say find someone who you really like and trust, who's going to take care of you, who's going to make sure that the loan closes on time. And then when you get an offer accepted, maybe do a little bit of research, see if this person can match. That's how I would do it. So next thing is the fun part. We get to look at properties. So I love looking at properties. It is so fun. We inevitably go on some adventures. And I could tell you a million stories, but I won't get into that. So when looking at properties, yes, it's fun. We want to get a feel for the house. I'm all about, does it logically make sense? And does it, especially if it's a primary residence, does it feel like it could be home? The other thing that's really important, that's the role of a real estate agent, is to educate you about the home and to educate you about homeownership, if you haven't owned a home before, and talk about what kind of maintenance the home will need. So as I'm looking at property, I always talk about foundation, siding. We look at the electric panel. We look at plumbing. We talk about, okay, if we wanted to open up this wall, how is this going to impact the structure? We want to think about, okay, the roof, we see some lifting shingles. You're going to maybe have to do the roof in about 10 years. Is that okay in your budget? Can you take that on? Because a roof needing to be done in 10 years, I wish I could. I can't negotiate that for you on inspection, right? But it's about setting you up for success for being a homeowner and for that particular property. I have a fieldstone foundation in my house. We need to mortar that every once in a while. Some people don't want to deal with a fieldstone foundation. I say, hey, if they haven't moved since, I'm the early 1900s, then, must be doing something right. But who knows? I see I have seen cracks filled in poured concrete. So, you never know. Every house is unique. So it's really important that your agent is help educating about the home and help making sure that you're taking on a right kind of a property for you based on some of the maintenance that it requires. So the next step is we make an offer. So we'll talk about strategy in a little bit, but a couple of things go into the offer. If you're buying in cash, it'll be a proof of funds. That's either a bank statement or sometimes a letter from your financial advisor will suffice. You'll also need the pre-approval. You will need the offer itself, which talks about how much and when you'll execute. Your contingencies document, which is typically your home inspection and your financing. Lead paint disclosure, if it's applicable to the property. Your agency disclosure, believe it or not, but that's happened. You forgot about that. And a picture of a $1,000 check that will only be deposited if the offer is accepted. And that is called your earnest money deposit. And once the seller deposits that check, it is held, the seller doesn't actually deposit it, it's held in an escrow account. So neither side has access to it until you close, but that is your conveyance. That is what legally binds the seller to you. So once we get the offer accepted, a couple of things need to happen really fast. We need to get that check deposited. There's a lot of online options right now, which make it really easy. We got to get that check deposited. We want the seller bound to us. We need to select a real estate attorney. Your agent can help you with that. If you know an attorney, awesome. Would recommend that it is someone who specializes in real estate, just because all law is nuanced. And then we need to schedule the home inspection. If you are working and you have a good relationship with your manager, I always recommend giving your manager a heads up that you might need to take a few hours off on short notice in order to do the inspection. We want to do the inspection like a few days after the offer is accepted. If day 0 is your offer, you want to do the inspection day 2, day 3, because if anything comes up in the inspection, we need to do further due diligence. So for example, if the electric panel, if something's off of the electric panel, maybe there's an incorrect double tap breaker, we will then need to bring in an electrician. He will evaluate it and he might say, actually, this is okay because it's a doorbell. That's actually the only time you're allowed to have a double tap, I believe. Or he might say, you know what, yes, this is an issue. It's going to cost this much to fix. And we take that number and we negotiate it with the seller. So simultaneously, the attorney is working with the other attorney, coming together with the next contract, which is called the purchase and sale. And then I'm working with a listing agent, negotiating anything that might come up in the inspection. And all of this goes into your next contract, which is the purchase and sale. So Massachusetts is a 2-contract state. We'll say day 0 is your offer. That says day 7, it can be 5 days. It can really be whenever, but I would say 5 to 7 is when your purchase and sale is signed. Up until now, we're doing everything electronically. You can sign the purchase and sale electronically. Your second deposit is due at this time, and it's 5% minus $1,000. So held in this escrow account is a total of 5%. And the next goal we're working towards is your mortgage commitment. So the lender will order an appraisal after this, and we'll start working towards your mortgage commitment. So I always joke, you're hot and heavy with me up until the purchase and sale, and then you're hot and heavy with underwriting after that. So that's when underwriting is going to ask you about all this minutia. If you're W-2, you're fine. If you're me, you have to have like a million printed out signed deposit transactions and all of that. But I always just think, thank God they're doing their thing so that we don't get into another 08 situation. So we're working towards your mortgage commitment date. And this date is extremely important because God forbid your circumstances change and you can no longer get a loan. If we notify the other party before this date, you get your full deposit back. And no matter what purchase price you are purchasing, that 5%, that's a lot of money. And that is something that everyone on your team, your agent, your lender, the attorney, everyone should take really seriously. And that's why it's so important to have good communication, particularly, obviously with your agent, but also with your lender, because when this date comes up, we want to know what are the contingencies, because sometimes there'll be still requirements left. And if it's, the final call to make sure you're still employed right before closing, we're probably going to be okay with that. If it's, a credit pull and you just bought a car, then we might have another issue. Don't buy a car. Side note, don't buy a car if you're thinking of buying a house. And then 7 to 10 days before closing, you're going to get the closing disclosure. Sometimes it happens not as far in advance as that, because there's so many moving parts and you have to wait for the seller to give you the final water reading, et cetera, et cetera. So sometimes it's a few days before. So my planners out there, I know I'm a planner too. I can really, the last minute stuff can really kill you, but just brace yourself for it. So unfortunately, real estate can be like that a little bit. And so then on closing day, usually that is when I like to do the final walkthrough, because that's where we have our maximum recourse. And just God forbid anything happens to the home, we will know that final walkthrough and we can negotiate accordingly. Some interesting final walkthroughs I have had. One time the seller didn't move out. We're actually still moving out of the house during the final walkthrough. There was so much stuff in the house, and we ended up getting a concession to have their stuff moved before we closed. So that was a really interesting one. We also had one where there was it was snowing, thank God, actually, it was a snowstorm. And the driveway, the road at the house wasn't plowed. And we had specifically spoken that this is considered public road, Needham plows it. And it wasn't plowed. And so we found out that year, Needham decided to make that portion of the road not a part of their plow route. So we got a concession for that. So that was interesting to negotiate, because I'm like, well, lifetime worth of paying for a snowplow, right? We didn't quite get that much, but we were able to get a significant chunk. So assuming everything goes well with the final walkthrough, if they were supposed to do any work, like let's say that electrician came, that example before, well before the closing, we would need to see a paid invoice that the electrician did the work. And so really this process, if you're financing, can take anywhere from 30 to 60 days, 45 is that in between. It can take longer if you choose to negotiate it that way. I do know some lenders who can close in 3 weeks. If you're interviewing lenders, that's an important question to ask. How fast can you close from the day of the offer? If you're paying in cash, you can close in 2 weeks. It just depends on title. Sometimes you need 2 weeks for title. So if you think about a week for the purchase and sale and then 2 weeks for title, usually you still need 3. But again, I know some attorneys who can call in favors with their title companies and get a really fast turnover from there. So just that simple. That's how you buy a house. So let's talk about the mechanics of an offer and negotiating. So there's really 3 levers if you think about it with real estate. You have your price, your timing, and your terms. Price is pretty obvious, right? It's how much I'm going to give, and there's always a give and take, right? So in last year's market and a little bit right now in this market, we were giving a lot, right? We're giving on price. We were giving whatever. What did you want for terms? What did you want for time seller? What do you want for deposits? We're giving it to you. But in a more normal market, and when we can actually negotiate, there's a natural give and take. So we might give you asking because it just came on the market, but we want a full home inspection. We want the ability to negotiate on a home inspection. Or maybe it's been on the market for a while, and so we're not coming near asking price. But we will be more lenient on a home inspection, or we'll give you a higher offer deposit to show you we have more skin in the game, or maybe we'll close sooner. So timing is one that I like to play with a lot. So timing, believe it or not, is not just the time that you close, although that is one of the most important ones, but it's the offer expiration. I love to give a short offer expiration date. So I will, for example, let's say if it's like what I like to call a no-brainer offer, maybe we're going in right at asking, the property is new to market. What does the seller have to think about, in my opinion, right? I'm giving you everything you want. So you put it at this price. If you wanted it to be more, maybe you should have listed it higher. That's on the buyer's end, right? That's our thought process. Although I would never negotiate that way with a listing agent. I always want the listing agent to think about putting the deal together, not arguing semantics with me. I always want them to focus on, okay, how can we put the deal together for these buyers? So that's a little bit of an aside, but timing can be the offer expiration. It can be how fast can we get to purchase and sale. I'm always willing to hustle to get to purchase and sale really quickly. And I can always call in favors for home inspections and just to make things move very quickly, because the seller likes to get to purchase and sale. It shows you're locked in. We got that bigger deposit. So that's another one. The other is, accommodating them on their closing timeline. Some sellers will want what's called a rent back, which is when you allow them to use the property for rent afterwards. One thing to think about timing for any of my renters out there, you pay your mortgage in arrears, unlike your rent, which you pay up front. So for example, you pay March rent on March 1, you pay March mortgage on April 1. And the reason why this is helpful if you're renting is that typically you pay your mortgage 2 calendar months after you close. So you could close March 1 or March 31st, but your first mortgage payment is May 1. Now, some lenders, like I know I've had this situation happen, like maybe they need you to close March 5th or something to pay May 1. That's nuanced, but it helps you budget. So maybe you have a longer time to move in, or maybe you can eliminate overlap, or maybe you have 1 month of overlap. Just helps in that way. And then there's terms. So you have your home inspection and your financing. Someone asked, do you recommend waiving a home inspection? The answer is no, I really don't recommend that, because home inspectors, look, they're not perfect. They're generalists. I'm very choosy about who I like to use or refer to my clients as a home inspector. And so maybe they're not going to pick up on everything, right? But if you don't see homes all the time, then you're really giving yourself zero recourse if you waive your inspection. Were people doing it a lot last year? Yes. Was it a winning strategy? Yes, it's a powerful move. There are other things we can do. You can try doing an inspection prior to submitting an offer if the seller allows that. You can say, I will do an informational only inspection, which means that you lose your $1,000 if you decide not to proceed. Or you can say, I want to get my $1,000 back, but I'm not going to negotiate. So seller, your price is your price. You don't have to worry about doing anything. So there's ways that we can be creative, but you really need to decide what is your risk appetite. Because as I mentioned earlier, buying real estate is about taking on risk. And it's calculated risk, though. And really, that's where your real estate agent's role comes in. And then in terms of financing, I have had some clients that creative, and so they can purchase in cash, but they're choosing to get financing. So maybe we'll do a proof of funds and a pre-approval. Again, you're taking on considerable risk. Really, 5% of the purchase price, that's your risk. You can actually quantify the risk when you waive your financing contingency. So yes, people were doing that before. Were they okay? Yes, but they were fully aware of the risk, and for whatever reason, whatever their personal circumstances, they were willing to do that. One more quick point about price that I forgot to mention. Another strategy I use at sometimes. I've been using it a little bit more this year is what's called an escalation clause. So let's say the list price is 500. There's an offer deadline. We think it's going to be competitive. We're not sure. We want to protect, your capital. So we might say, okay, well, we'll offer you 505 with a $5,000 escalation up until maybe 535, whatever it is. Those numbers, by the way, are based on my analysis. How I do it is based on my analysis of the market and the current sales to determine what is a good value for this home if you're going over asking, so that you're not over purchasing. Last year, around this time, we were in a rising market. So we knew that property was going to appraise later in the spring. But right now we're in a market that might be stabilizing. So we're taking that into account. as I'm doing this analysis. So the pro of the escalation clause is that you're in the game, but maybe you don't have to pay as high as you would if you just did a flat offer for the 535, to go back to that example. Con is you're showing your hand. So I don't like to use it all the time. Those are a couple of different examples of how you can be creative when you're negotiating. And I always like to talk about offer strategy right from the get-go when we're seeing homes, so you can start wrapping your head around it and you feel comfortable when the time comes. So before I open it up to questions, just some parting advice. So I would say, look, don't try to time the market. We don't know what's going to happen. I shared my thoughts based on what I'm seeing right now in our current market. If it is a good time and it's the right time for you personally to buy, then buy. You can always make any market work for you. There are always deals to be had, and you can always buy intelligently. So don't try and time the market, especially if you're waiting for rates to go down, because I hate to be a Debbie Downer, I don't think they're going down anytime soon. Hope I'm wrong about that, but that's what I'm seeing. So I said, so advice number one, don't time the market. Advice number two, don't settle. I have, I've had a couple of buyers ever say to me like, well, do you think something better is going to come on? The second they say that to me, I'm like, this isn't the right house for you. If you are even thinking about that, it isn't the right house. Do not settle. This is a huge investment. And I promise you, 212 times, like I have done this, I promise you, you find the right house. So you can get discouraged at times, but focus on the end goal. And then the final advice I'll give to you is from that investor who gave me advice about when is a good time to buy when I was interested in investing. I said, you have over 500 units. How have you done it? When is a good time to buy? And he said, Allie, when you can afford it. And again, kind of going back to don't time the market. So that is all my comments, Tom. Do we have any questions?
Allie, thank you so much. I mean, you covered a lot in a short period of time. We'll let you grab a sip, and we do have a number of questions. I mean, we have a very engaged group, and
Pizza.
I'll just jump right
Wonderful.
into it for these last few minutes. You know, we've got a nice mix on the line today. Some kind of first-time home buyers, some folks that are looking to downsize or add secondary property. One common question is, can you explain the down payment process? And if you can, what is a reasonable down payment percentage? We've had a few questions along those down payment.
Okay, got it. So you can do anywhere from 3.5% to 20% or more. I would say, and not to punt the question, but you really need to talk with a lender and figure out what your monthly payment is and where you want to stay with your monthly payment. And that's going to dictate how much you put down and your purchase price. So I would say if you have, if you think you have 5%, then because not everyone qualifies for the 3.5, that would be an FHA loan. If you have 5%, I would start thinking about it, start having a conversation. Just because you have the conversation doesn't mean that you have to, that you have to do anything. I think everyone kind of gets nervous. I don't want to look at that house. I don't want to talk to someone because, I'm not sure if I'm not ready, but it doesn't hurt to start getting educated. So that's the range, the standard range. You're not going to have mortgage insurance, which is could be an extra couple $100s a month if you have 20%. But I would say, a lot of, especially first-time home buyers don't have 20%. I certainly didn't have 20% on my first property, nor my second property. So as long as it's your primary residence, then you don't need that full 20%.
We have kind of a specific follow-up to the
Okay.
down payment question. Is we have someone on the line who said that they have they're planning to put down a large down payment, and they don't have to wait to sell their current house. So in
Okay,
your
that's good.
perspective, does that make them a more attractive buyer than most?
Yes, it does. And that's not to knock people who can't put that much down, but it is to a seller's standpoint, from their mind frame, they like when you put a lot of money down because they feel that whether this is right or not, the idea is that you have really strong financing. The other thought is that if it doesn't appraise, that appraisal matters less to you getting qualified for your loan. So it actually really does help. And I will add as an aside that it's nearly impossible, and I hate speaking in absolutes, but it's nearly impossible to get an offer accepted with a home sale contingency. So the fact that you have that large down payment and you don't need to sell absolutely gives you a leg up.
Similar along those lines, we've had a few questions about like advice on coordinating both buying a place and selling a place at the same time. Are there strategies around that, or what would you advise someone who's looking to buy and sell roughly simultaneously?
So I work with a lot of people who are buying and selling. So there's a couple of different ways you can do it. I always like to say, which side, if you want to do it simultaneously, which side of the deal do you want to control? Do you want to control the sell, or do you want to control the buy? If you sell first, we can control that, right? We can choose when we want to sell, the price we want to sell it at. And then you can try to negotiate that the buyer gives you more time to buy. That's challenging right now because people know rates are going to go up and buyers want to lock in their rate. And typically you get the best rate lock about 30 days prior to closing. So that means the buyer's taking on a lot of risk. You could have the buyer give you a rent back period, but there's only, if it's their primary residence, they can only give you 2 months after closing. So you can control the buy, and then you might have to hustle on, actually, you can control the sell in that example, but you might have to either have a really short timeline on the buy or just have to jump into something because you have to. So that's one option. If you control the buy, then what you do is right when you're under agreement at the purchase and sale, we list that property. And what I like to do for clients in this situation is we actually have the house, the marketing done already. So, we might have the marketing done 6 months in advance, depending on how long it takes you to find a place. And that does mean some upfront work for you, but it means the second that we're under agreement, you can list. And you have to list aggressively, particularly if you need that down payment. You need to list extremely aggressively to make sure that the property flies off the market. What I'm recommending right now for people who have to buy and sell is, depending on your price point, you can look into those interesting programs that I mentioned before, where the lender will underwrite you based on your sale price and let you wait to sell. You can do something like that. Or I would say sell first and move into like a rental for a little bit. If you want a longer time to try and buy, because the market, we're in a transitioning period. So whereas last year and the year before, I'd say, your property will just fly off the shelf. We don't have to worry about it. We're in an extremely low inventory environment. Right now we're transitioning. So even if it means moving in with relatives, I would encourage you to try and sell first, and give yourself some time to buy if you have to do that. If not, there's ways you can do it simultaneously, and it's done successfully all the time.
We have a few people on the line who are interested in kind of diversifying or expanding their properties. So we've actually had a few questions from folks asking, how are the current market conditions affecting vacation properties or secondary home properties? Can you talk a little bit about that?
This is so interesting. So first of all, love you people out there who want to diversify your properties. I think that's amazing. I think it's a great investment. I just made an investment like that myself. It's so interesting. So just to use something that's kind of more hyper local, not every market is the same. I would say there's opportunity in Rhode Island right now in terms of some vacation areas. And again, I'm speaking very broadly. Don't think you can go out and, buy the breakers anytime soon, although that would be cool. But down the Cape, we're still seeing properties still be pretty competitive. And the Cape is actually on a totally different MLS. So I have done some work out there, but I usually refer out. And I have the agent who I became very close with. She says that she notices the Cape market actually lags the Boston and Greater Boston market. So as we're starting, I mean, again, if you're my buyers right now, you're like, Allie, it still feels really competitive. I can hear them like squeaking in my ear, like, and I'm like, I know it is, but it is stabilizing, believe it or not, because my perspective is from what we were experiencing last year. But the Cape is still really hot in some ways. Now they say the Cape is a good time to buy, in the winter down there. But the short answer is that I think buying vacation homes is a really, really great investment. If one, if you want to use it for yourself, awesome, that's wonderful. You can buy it as a secondary residence, and you actually get not as good a rate as your primary residence, but better than a purely investment property. And you can rent it still and get some money from it, but there's just a time limit on it. There's only a restriction on how much you can rent it for. So, what's great about vacation properties, if you're looking at them as an investment, is this short-term rental. Your mortgage is really high, right? Rates are high, prices are still high. Maybe there'll be another dip. Who knows? Will it make it super, super affordable? I doubt we're going to have any bargains anytime soon. I doubt we're going to have, buy triple deckers in South Boston for $7,000 again, right? So what I like about these vacation homes is that renting them per week really helps you maximize your cash flow on the property. Now, the one thing that you need to think about is that there's a lot more wear and tear on the property. There's a higher turnover cost. You're turning the property over weekly. You have to pay for cleaning. It's also more of a business because you're going to get reviews versus if I, rent out my condo and my other unit in my two family. No one's going to. I do think I'm a nice landlord, so hopefully they would write me a nice review anyway. But no one is writing you reviews like it's a real business. But I really like the vacation properties because so many people are not going back into the office. They like the idea of working from home in a different location. I think that's going to be here for a long time. And so I am a big fan of vacation properties as a way to actually cash flow because, as I mentioned earlier, I'm very passionate about investing in real estate. And, I look at multifamily properties in Boston and Greater Boston all the time. And it's a really tough pill to swallow that you're putting these massive, you put 25% down on, a multi-unit property and maybe you'll make $500 a month. I mean, that's a tough pill to swallow. That's, a 3% capitalization rate versus, you could spend a lot less money, right? You could buy a single family home and, rent it out per week. Another interesting, and I just interesting thing to add about is to find areas. And I know Rhode Island has this, and I have my license in Rhode Island now, but I was interested in it as an investor for a long time. Is they have markets where you can rent September to June and then do weekly for the summer months. And what's nice about that is you have a long-term tenant during the winter. You're going to get hopefully your mortgage or most of your mortgage paid for that. And you're going to have less of that high impact, high turnover. And also, to me, I lean towards conservative. I always think, well, who's going to stay in a summer place in the winter, right? Yeah, people do, I know, but I'd rather think of, okay, someone's going to be here for 9 months. So that's another interesting kind of an property to look for and see if there are markets like that where you can potentially invest in. So I hope I didn't digress too much on that one. I got all excited.
No, Allie, thank you. And we're at time. I mean, this went by
Okay.
very,
Oh,
very fast. And
wow. Okay.
I just want to thank you for sharing your time and your knowledge and your passion with us today. It really came through, and we are grateful for you spending time with us. And we hope to continue offering more of these Holy Cross webinars throughout the coming months. So stay tuned for upcoming notices about future dates and topics. And in the meantime, thank you, Allie, and all of you. Have a great evening. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Just really quick, if you want to follow me on social media for more tips about real estate, it's Allie.theagent. And then I always like to reach out afterwards. So you have my contact info if we didn't get to any of your questions. So thank you so much, Tom, for having me. Thank you, everyone, for listening, and hope everyone has a great night.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.